Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NgEX Virtual Diaspora series for February. And today we're going to talk about the recent US immigrant ban for Nigerians. And today we have Chinwe. We have Chinwe from Daria Law Firm and Nneka from AfriPac that are going to speak to us about the legal implications and the policy implications of the ban. Right, so I'll just go ahead and allow them introduce themselves. So Chinwe, please get started and introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Mrs. Chinwe Chido-Nwangwu. I'm the managing attorney at Daria Law Firm, a Houston-based immigration and tax resolution and litigation law firm. I have, immigration is a passion for me, and that's why I practice immigration law. But in addition to having a GAD, I also have an LLM in taxation, and my background is actually very technical. I have a computer science and mathematics background. And I know most times people want to know why I moved into law is because of passion. So that is in a brief overview of who I am. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chinwe. Nneka, please, if you can just introduce yourself as well. Nneka, are you on?
Hello.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Go ahead. Great. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. I guess I was muted. Good afternoon. My name is Nneka Achapu, and I'm the Executive Director of the African Public Affairs Committees. I am also the founder of the U.S. Bilateral African Chamber of Commerce, which is an organization based here in Houston. I came to the U.S. as an immigrant in the early 2000s, and I've been in this country initially working in the community as a healthcare worker, and later on moving on to working on policy. I began my policy work at the ACLU of Texas, where I was working as an immigrant rights strategist, where I looked at local policies that were affecting different immigrant communities. And I decided to move on to found my own organization called the African Public Affairs Committee, which was founded with the sole purpose of empowering the African diaspora and teaching the mechanisms of what it takes to grab onto political power. So far, it's been an interesting year. We were at the Supreme Court supporting DACA recipients, and at Congress, we've done some office visits and are really excited to be here today to speak about the policies and the implications that are affecting the African community in general, in addition to Nigeria, Sudan, Tanzania, and Eritrea.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Nneka. So just some housekeeping rules. So we'll go ahead and have Chinwe and Nneka talk to us about the ban, and then especially from their background and the experience in terms of what they've been seeing in the community and how best they think we as individuals and as a community can handle the implications of the ban. And then you can raise your hand as a participant. You can raise your hand and ask questions. We already have a series of questions that have been submitted. We'll ask those questions. If you raise your hand, you can submit a question, and we'll go ahead and include those questions in the list of questions that we'll be asking after Chinwe and Nneka have given us some background information. Right. So Chinwe, coming to you, right? Everybody knows about this ban, right? A lot of people were surprised. Some of you guys were not really surprised because we could see it coming. Right. So can you just give us, from your own experience, right, how we arrived at this point, right? We all know how Trump came in and things have just been deteriorating from there. But if you can just give us from a legal perspective how we arrived at this point and where we are today.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Before I get started, I usually like to put out a disclaimer. The presentation is provided primarily for information purposes, and it's not an attorney-client relationship, and also not a substitute for you to seek legal advice. So if you have issues with immigration, please consult an immigration attorney, especially if you're in Nigeria and you're planning to migrate to the United States on a permanent basis. The travel ban was signed into law. This expanded the current one that impacts Nigeria. Most of the conversation today will probably be about Nigeria because that's our primary audience. The current expanded travel ban was signed by proclaimed by Trump and signed into law January 31st, 2020. And we call it the expanded travel ban 3.0. There was an initial travel ban 1.0, travel ban 2.0, and then travel ban 3.0. The first two was knocked down by the Supreme Court as not being constitutional because it was too broad. However, the travel ban 3.0, which is impacting Nigeria because Nigeria's ban is based on the expansion of the travel ban 3.0, was found to be constitutional by the Supreme Court. It's also important to know that the president has very broad powers when it comes to immigration because immigration affects and impacts the US national security. So most times the president, whoever the president is that is in office, is usually given a broad power by the Constitution to enforce and implement immigration. It's also important to note that immigration laws are discretionary. So most times, depending on what the law is and what the rule is, it's always at the discretion of whoever is processing your application or your paperwork. So the expanded travel ban, this current one, luckily for different countries, impacts different people. But like I said, this conversation is going to be primarily for Nigeria. For the Nigerian citizens, the expanded travel ban only impacts immigrant visas, except the immigrant visas of those who have been provided or who have provided, they call them special immigrants, immigrants that have provided assistance to the United government. Those are the only group of immigrants currently that are exempt from this ban. Luckily for Nigeria, the non-immigrant visas are still in play. That means there's no ban on the non-immigrant visas. So the question is, most times people get confused about what is an immigrant visa and what is not an immigrant visa. A simple way to know what is an immigrant visa and remember what is not an immigrant visa is know that immigrant visas are permanent visas. So once you're issued that, you're expected to come and live in the United States on a permanent basis. So some of the immigrant visas will be, most of them are family-based. That will be your green card visas. Some work visas are also on that list. The non-immigrant visas, which is how 90% of Nigerians come into the United States, will be the tourist visas, the visiting visas. Those were not impacted by this travel ban. So I'm assuming that a significant percentage of Nigerians will not have any problem with regards to this ban. Now, we know that presently that there are a couple of people that are expressing concerns as to regards to the number of approvals. But we need to understand that immigration is discretionary. So approval or not is not a right, it's a privilege. But however, Nigerians need to understand that all the non-immigrant visas are still available to them. People that are exempt from this travel ban. Another question that people ask is, a lot of people in the United States, most of the questions I was getting from people in the United States was how it impacts them. Everybody needs to understand, once you've been admitted into the United States, that means if you have arrived here with whatever visa you used to come in and you crossed the border and you crossed immigration and they stamped it and allowed you to come in, that means you've been admitted into the United States. This travel ban does not affect you. If you're a lawful permanent resident, I've also gotten calls from people asking, their green card holders, can they travel? Will they have problem coming in? The answer is you shouldn't have any problem coming in, unless, of course, there's some other issues that is preventing you, but it's not going to be because of the travel ban. Diplomats are also exempt from this. And then Nigerians who have already been granted asylum, withholding, any of those protections are also not impacted by this travel ban. So like I said, in the whole scheme of things, if you're a Nigerian, the group of people impacted are really a small subsector of our community that travel to the United States on an immigrant visa. So who are these people? Most times you're looking at a child that is a US citizen in America is sponsoring the parents. So instead of asking the parents to come and visit, they choose to file the green card papers and ask them to go to the consulate to obtain their green card and come to the United States with green card. Those applications or petitions no longer will be approved as long as this ban is in play. Another group of people that will be impacted is couples. If you marry and your wife is in Nigeria and you now want to bring her over as a spouse, that is also an immigrant visa because you want to bring her here with a green card. Presently, under this current ban, you will not be able to achieve that. But I need people to understand that there are two aspects to this process. So there's the process of applying with the USCIS. That you can still do. What is being impacted is the process of going to the consulate to obtain your immigrant visa. That is where you have a ban. The question is, why did the Trump administration put this ban in place? Well, the Trump administration's position is that it's national security reasons. And they did provide all the countries who have citizens seeking visa to the United States. The Trump administration provided them information sharing and identity management protocols, which they expected these countries to comply with. Unfortunately, what the Trump administration is saying about Nigeria is the Nigerian government did not comply with this benchmark. I don't know if some of you have seen some videos, but there was a conference, a conference with the Secretary of State and the Nigerian counterpart, where the Nigerian government has promised that they're working diligently. And I also understand that the United States government remitted some funds to the Nigerian government to help them develop this process so that hopefully once there's a review, which should come into play, I believe sometime October of this year. And then if Nigeria is not, if the ban is not lifted, it's going to be a yearly review to see if Nigeria is in compliance. Now, the question is, does it mean that if I have a family member and I want them to come out here on an immigrant visa that they cannot make it? Fortunately for us, there are waivers. So under the travel ban, if you are eligible for an immigrant visa and you go to the embassy official will look to see if the waiver will apply to you. So if you're able to demonstrate that you're eligible for a waiver, then you should be able to be granted visa. The waiver is difficult. There are 3 rules that you must prove to the immigration officer in order for you to be granted a waiver. You have to show them that there's undue hardship if you're denied a visa. Undue hardship is not a hard bar to cross. It's not like extreme hardship. But you have to show and prove and convince the person interviewing you at the consulate that there's going to be undue hardship if they don't allow you to come into the United States on an immigrant visa. The second rule is that you have to show that your entry does not pose a national threat to US national security. That is a little bit, also a little bit easy to prove. What that entails is if there's a US person and or a US entity that will undergo hardship, if you're not allowed to come in, then they need to consider that. You need to show them proof of who or what that is. The final one is where the initial technical information sharing stuff that I talked about earlier is applicable. That means that your entry is in US national interest. So you have to, if you meet all of these requirements, then they will issue you a waiver and you should be able to come into the United States. I think I've spoken for too long, so let me pass the mic back to our moderator.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chinwe. We are very insightful, a lot of information to digest there. So Nneka, coming to you, from your own perspective, you're on the policy side, the advocacy side, right? Can you also tell us like what you've seen and how we actually got here? Chinwe has given us some insight into what the administration has done, but you're seeing it from, I guess, how the ecosystem operates and how Nigeria was taken into consideration, to arrive at this point. So if you can give us some insight into what you're seeing within that ecosystem, we would appreciate that.
Just keeps going on mute.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think there's a little issue with you having to unmute me, but
Right,
it's okay.
yes, I'll note that. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I have noticed is that there's a lack of visibility when we are talking about immigration regarding African or Black immigrants. The issue is not it's not popular among, regular political people. And it's unfortunate because it stems from our lack of interest in politics. This ban came about a few months ago, and it seems like the community has responded in a way where it's almost like it's nonchalant attitude. No one knows what to do. No one knows what to fend for. No one is advocating. And I think it stems from an issue of not having power and not ever having to deal with this issue before. I know that there are other communities that have been very successful in advocating for bans or, immigration changes. I know that the Liberian community, although they've been fighting for a long time, were able to get together, show up at the courts, fill the courts with people, Liberians that were being severely impacted by these policies. And unfortunately, I feel that in this case, it's going to be very hard to show the same level of urgency and to convey the importance of this ban in our communities. I'm hoping that will change because this is a precursor of many more scary things to come, in my opinion. So I think it's important that the Nigerian community as a whole, and I can only speak as a Nigerian, needs to get together and figure out what to do in terms of advocacy and ensuring that our voices are heard. But for that to happen, we need to ensure that people that are being affected are okay with sharing their stories. No one is going to really care if impacted people are not coming forth with, how they're being impacted.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. So, I mean, just going on with what you just talked about in terms of, the visibility of our community, within the US. I know a lot of people watched the presentation, the series by Fareed Zakari on CNN, where he talked about the Nigerian community and the ban. And he pointed out a few things, he said, the New Economy Research Foundation, I guess, says Nigerians in the US generate about $14 billion every year and pay about $4 billion in taxes, right? Remittances, I know the remittances from the US alone to Nigeria, it's estimated about $7 to $8 billion, right? And we know that this is America where the numbers count, right? And for a lot of us, we see these numbers, and then, but on the advocacy side, we don't see any representation. On the monetary side, we do see the huge amount of numbers. We all hear about the stats that show that we're very qualified. We're above all the median numbers when it comes to the immigrants in here, right? So I guess that's leading on to what you were talking about, right? So looking at these numbers and the stats, right? What are the things that you think that we should be doing at this point?
We should be engaging our elected officials.
Okay.
Not only engaging, but we should also be looking to become elected officials. We should be running for office. All that educational success, financial success cannot translate to anything until there's some kind of political representation. It's just that simple. And then the other thing is that as far as having our community represented and counted, we don't vote. We don't have strong numbers at the polls to make the case for, hey, I'm your constituent. You should really care about this because I matter. Why would any politician care when they cannot even get a voting bloc to support them? So it's almost as if we need to look back and have a really honest conversation with ourselves and the things that we want. What do we want? We want more representation. Well, what does that take? That takes voting. That takes having our own elected official, or having even elected officials that represent our interests. The community, the Somali community in Minnesota was able to elect a whole congresswoman. Why is it that in Texas, in the largest state in the US, where there's a large significant population of African immigrants, Nigerians, we can't elect even a city council person? I mean, we need to really start thinking about what it means to have political power and what it takes. So this is, I think, a great opportunity to show that the Nigerian community is not just successful at being or at having lawyers, medical doctors, and businessmen and healthcare people. They're also good at politics. And for that, we need to have a strong showing of that. So showing up at the polls, electing officials that, are keen to our interests, and following politics. From the school board all the way to legislative races, all elections matter. You would be surprised at the amount of things that could be affected in something as small as a school board. The kind of textbooks your children are reading, the kind of, how the lights get fixed, whether it's LED, how safety is budgeted for. All of that stems from politics, legislative action, and being informed. And if our people are not being informed, when things such as a ban is enforced, there's nothing that we can do. So I think it's important for us at this point to seize this moment, seize this opportunity to do more than just sitting on the stands and watching this administration do what they want with our people.
Okay.
Let me chime in a little bit, Obina. Let me chime in on the issue of Fareed Zakaria and the CNN documentary on this issue. It is accurate that Nigerians make a representation of, in terms of even Americans, Nigerian currently is top in terms of academic accomplishments and achievements in the United States. And most of us are first generation Americans. So that is to be lauded. But the key issue, I think the point that Fareed was trying to make was with regards to if there is a new immigration law. The current Trump administration is trying to say that the immigration law should change. And their narrative is that the basis for admission should no longer be family, which is the current system we have, where primarily most immigrants are family-based. And they're trying to set up a point system similar to what you have in Canada. So Fareed was saying that he didn't understand why Nigeria was part of this ban, because even if you're using the current system that Trump's administration is planning to use in the future, the Nigerians make up a significant percent. Nigerians should not be impacted in any way because we meet all the criteria. We are educated, we are hardworking, and we have all the point system in our favor. Now, with regards to, so that was the point that the Farid was trying to make. But that issue is not the reason why there's a travel ban. The reason why there's a travel ban is because the Trump administration is concerned about national security. And once the issue is national security, the Supreme Court's given this, the Supreme Court said and have stated and ruled that the president has broad powers to enforce and implement and protect the US national interest. That is the reason why Nigeria is on this list. So the question is, what is the role the Nigerian government needs to play in order to ensure that we get off of the list? So in addition to getting Nigerians very active in the United States and getting us to participate and to understand how lobbying works, I think Nigerians in diaspora also need to understand that they need to push their own our government, and even those of us here in diaspora and Nigerians back home need to understand that we need to push our government to look to see how they can comply with this requirement so that Nigeria can be removed from the list of nations that are banned, because we're not really supposed to be there. That is the point Farid was trying to make on that CNN episode.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. Well, Chima, thanks for that. So come back to you. So Nneka, I know you wanted something to add on this.
Well, unfortunately, I don't agree completely with the fact that this is only a security issue. This administration has been really racist against Black and brown people in general. So to just say that this is just a security issue, it's really not what I mean, in my opinion, my own opinion is not that. We have seen from the very beginning, from the very inception of the Muslim ban, all the way till the way ICE has been set out to terrorize families, border security spending. I mean, this administration just has it with immigrants, period. We just have to be honest about that.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So we have, two opinions here. I don't think either is wrong. Like the, as JP Morgan that said, in anything, there's always a good reason, and then there's the real reason. So I guess we'll figure out which is the good reason and which is the real reason.
I mean, he knows, if I may add,
right?
He knows that Nigerians are successful. So what's the best way to make sure that they don't come and continue expanding their prowess into the US? Let's block the immigrant visas. Because if you wonder, the same process that people are getting, visas to study, to whatever, the same scrutiny is the same scrutiny that they're using to process non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas. So why is it that they're blocking them? Why the discrepancy? Why are we just blocking one type and the other not?
Right.
Okay, so let me say this. The student visa is a non-immigrant visa. Nigerians are still allowed to come to the United States on a student visa. That is not impacted by this ban. Like I said, we need to make the distinction. The non-immigrant visa category is still available to all Nigerians who wish to migrate to the United States. The question is, and what we need to understand is that once you go to the embassy or to whoever is the official adjudicating your case, you need to understand that it's a discretionary call. So you have to prove to that individual that you're eligible or you qualify or you merit what you're seeking. If you're not able to do that, or if for whatever reason you're not able to comply, then that is a different issue. But this ban, at least there's some countries where both the immigrant and non-immigrant visas are banned. Nigeria is not there. Nigeria, for Nigerians, all non-immigrant visa categories, which is how predominantly most Nigerians come to the United States to visit and go back home, they still have that available to them. The group that I said have this problem are those seeking immigrant visas. Granted that families will be impacted because it's mainly families that seek immigrant visas, but it's not a huge percentage of the Nigerian population that is impacted. It's just a small group that will be impacted or that is impacted by this ban.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I get, like you said, two different opinions here. In terms of the reasons for the ban. I guess, it's causing a lot of apprehension. So Chinwe, I know you had talked earlier, we talked, about the timeline.
Yes.
People are wondering, how long is this ban going to be in place? Is it going to be permanent? Is there anything our government can really do? And I'm suspecting that as soon as if it gets lifted, there's going to be a flood of applications that are coming in. So
definitely, there'll be backlog of applications. Right. Yes,
right. So
it's indefinite at the moment. That is how the proclamation read. There's no timeline, but the proclamation did say that after 180 days, that there will be a review. So sometime in October, there will be a review. So let's assume that the Nigerian government has complied with the U.S. National security concerns as stipulated by the United States government. Let's say Nigerian government has complied and they review it and they determine that they're in compliance. Nigeria should be removed from that list sometime in October. But based on the proclamation again, if they don't meet that requirement, then it's a yearly review. Right. So we also need to understand, and I agree with my Nneka, we need to understand that elections matter. Most of these issues are not there. We need to understand that they're temporary in the sense that they're all executive orders. So the immigration law has not changed because we don't have any new immigration law. It's the same immigration law. However, the policy process that the Trump administration is using or their interpretation of the immigration law is just different. And the way they're enforcing it is different, which is their prerogative. They have the right to do that. That's the problem with immigration, it's broad. So the Trump administration is enforcing it. So we need to understand, with regards to what Nneka is saying, yes, those of us in the United States, if we care about this issue, then elections matter. So maybe we need to participate more. If there's a change in administration to maybe another administration, to another, let's say the Democrats win, if they're sympathetic to immigrant issues, maybe the next president will change policy or issue another executive order until there's a comprehensive immigration law in place. But for right now, we're working under this administration, and it's a broad discretionary powers that they have. And they're enforcing the current laws, the existing laws that have been used for years. They're just enforcing it differently. That is why it's impacting everybody differently.
Okay, Chinwe, thanks. So Nneka, Charlie. Yeah. So coming back to you, before we jump into the Q&A, so I know you talked a little bit about the Liberian community, what they were able to do here. I think what we're getting here as an overarching consensus is basically elections matter. We need to be more active in seeking out and participating in to achieve outcomes that we want, right? So I don't know if you can just give us a quick rundown of what the Liberian community was able to do here with their lobbying efforts, or even like the Somali community. Just a few minutes on that.
Sure. So basically, Liberia was having some issues with some temporary protective status. It was going to expire sometime in March, and the community rallied together in several of the states where they had a large number of Liberians, and they packed the courts whenever they were discussing the merits of the case for TPS. So you can see that their advocacy was rewarded because they ended up extending the TPS. They had an extension for a year. Now they're working hard to see if there's going to be some permanent, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. They are actually having now availability to apply for green cards. I know that there's a window of time. I'm not an attorney, so I don't have the exact dates where the people that had TPS can apply for green card for Liberians, but they were able to achieve that. How were they able to do it? Through advocacy, through showing up, through sending letters to their congressmen, to their congresspeople, and just telling their story. People don't realize how important it is to tell the story to the media. I recently had a case where someone of Nigerian descent was being held at the airport, detained. The family didn't want to come through with the story. We had the Houston Chronicle, we had the AP News. Everyone wanted to be able to tell the story, but the family was so against it that it just moved on to the next news cycle. And unfortunately, we have to use this time to highlight these issues and bring attention to it. And the only way to do it is through media, as sad as it is, and participation in politics. Like Dr. Chinyere said, it's important that we show up at the polls. It's important that we show up at election. It's important that we support every effort to ensure that we don't have another 4 years of this. Just recently, just yesterday, they announced that they were going to open a denaturalization office. So we have to start really looking and paying attention at what another 4 years could look for us as immigrants, as African people. We have to care more.
Yes. Well, thank you, Chinyere. Oh, sorry, Nneka. So yeah, let's jump into the Q&A. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. So we just go specific. Chinyere and Nneka, I know you've addressed some of them, but I'll bring some of them back up so that at least people get a chance to hear them again. So starting off with the first question is the ban going to affect those who just applied for R1 visas before the ban? So it's two questions. So is the ban going to affect those who apply for R1 visas, and how does the ban affect EB2 NIW application as a non-resident alien in the US? So I think Chinyere,
like I said, if you're in the US, this ban does not affect you. Doesn't matter what visa category you're trying to adjust to. This ban does not affect you if you're Nigerian and you've already been admitted into the United States. So if you're currently living in the United States, you should not be concerned with this ban. That is a travel ban. So it's for people traveling into the United States. Those are the people that are impacted. And it's for people coming in with an immigrant visa. The R visa is not an immigrant visa, so they're not impacted.
Okay. Okay. Next question is, what other routes can people take to bring their family members over?
If you want to bring a family member over on an immigrant visa, there's no other route, and they're in Nigeria, you have to seek the waiver. That was why I said, once you have to seek the waiver and see if they're eligible. But what I'm advising my clients is, if you're in the United States and let's say your mom is in Nigeria and you want to bring her in on an immigrant visa, that is, you want her to come to the United States with a green card, as opposed to just inviting her to come and visit you and come in on a visiting visa. If that is your situation, I will still encourage you to apply to handle the first part of the issue, which is the application to obtain the I-130 approval, the sponsorship approval with USCIS. And then once that is done, you can hold off and wait till you're ready, or wait to see if the ban will be lifted before you pursue the consulate aspect of it, which is where this ban is applicable. However, if your mom is in Nigeria and you just want her to come and visit you, then she should go to the embassy. There's no rule presently that is denying Nigerians access to come in on a non-immigrant visa. So let's assume she comes in, that means she's now been admitted. So if she comes in to visit you on a visiting visa and she's allowed to come into the United States, she has been admitted. At that point, this ban no longer affects her situation. You can choose then to adjust status for her and sponsor her for green card if that is your intention. Let's say she comes and you now decide that you want her to now stay here on a permanent basis, then you can make that decision at that point.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing you say, Chinwe, is twofold. One, you can actually start the process. Nothing stops you from starting the process now, right?
Yes.
At least get that going. These things take years to process anyway.
Anyway, yes.
And you can start the process and pray, right? Essentially.
Yes.
And then the other part is you can also try the non-immigrant part, which is,
that is true.
Having someone get them in here, and then once they're in here, then it's a different ball game, right? The band
they can look for options and alternatives on how to adjust status. Yes.
Okay. So that's good to know. I'll throw another one out, which is a more general question. So someone asked, is it fair to ban Nigerian Christians for Islamic reasons? I was gonna put that out there. But,
I don't know that.
So I'll let Nneka start. So hold on. I'll let Nneka start with this.
Okay, Nneka.
Yeah. And
well, Nigeria is not a terrorist country, so I don't understand, to be honest.
Right. So I think
You want me to respond to that?
Well, yeah. So I guess why I ask this question out there is just because there's definitely a lot of misinformation going around. People make their own judgments as to why the ban was put in place and all that. So it's just more for the conversation than for, I guess, being specific. But yes, Chinwe, you can go ahead.
Yes, Nigeria has Boko Haram, and Boko Haram's headquarters is in Nigeria. So my understanding is there's a concern and a legitimate reason why the United States government is concerned about having a heightened scrutiny with regards to issuing visa to Nigerians. Now, Christians, Nigerian is made up of part Christians and part Muslim. Like I said, if you're coming in on an immigrant visa, then you have a waiver available to you. So what the waiver does is it looks to see your case, and if you meet all the three requirements, that is, you don't pose a threat to US national security, not being allowed will cause you undue hardship, and that there will be hardship on your US citizen relative, you will be granted the visa. So we should see this ban as not a full ban because there's still a waiver. So let's say you are a practicing wonderful Christian. You don't have any problem. You don't have any problem with the law. You don't have any problem with, you haven't been arrested. Then you should have access to an immigrant visa. The problem that the United States government is having with Nigeria is lack of information sharing. So Nigerians don't document things, or they don't document it properly. So the United States government is unable to access information about Nigerians. There's the issue of passport. Like I read, sometimes you lose your passport and you can easily get another passport. It's difficult for people to track who is who in Nigeria. So they've given them a guideline on how to ensure that Nigerians who are terrorists are known. That way, it will be easy for the American government to say, okay, you're a terrorist, we don't want you in America. It's their prerogative to choose who they want to come into the United States and who not to. Oh, you're a wonderful Christian or you're a wonderful Muslim, you're not a terrorist, you're not doing things wrong, then you're welcome to come to the United States. The problem the American government is currently having is the Nigerian government is not providing them information and data to assess this information credibly and correctly. That's why Nigeria is currently on the ban. So hopefully it's not targeted at Christians and that Christians are not being penalized because of Muslims. That's not my understanding of what is going on. So my interpretation of it is totally different.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chinwe, for that. So we'll take a question from the attendees. So again, if you're listening in and you have a question, you can just raise your hand and ask the question, and then we'll just pass it on to the panelists. So Chinwe, one question here is to be more up your alley. Someone asked, what about coming from Canada and applying for spouse's visa?
Okay, it depends on your status in Canada. If you're a Canadian citizen, you shouldn't have problem coming into the United States. Again, if you're coming in, the key issue and the key word I want everybody to take home is admission. So if you're coming from Canada and you're able to cross the border with legitimate visa and you arrive into the United States and you're admitted, that means you are now in America. This travel ban does not apply to you. So if you're coming from Canada, as long as you have a sponsor, that means you have somebody, either an individual or a corporation, depending on the category of visa you're looking for, and you have a sponsor who's going to sponsor your application to adjust status, then you shouldn't have a problem.
Okay. So another question, lots of questions around immigration. I know you've answered these questions, but I'm going to ask them again.
I know.
So that people,
Immigration is a hot topic.
Again.
Yes.
So the next question is, I just started graduate school. If I get a job upon completion in 2021, will I be granted a work permit?
Yes, if you get a job and your employer is willing to sponsor you, you should have a problem transitioning from a student visa to, depending on the route you're seeking, you could transition to a non-immigrant H1, and then also now finally transition to an immigrant green card. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, provided you have a sponsor. Your question is if you have an employer. So if you get a job, yes, your employer should sponsor you.
Okay. And then, so the next question is, Nneka, have you start with this? How does this affect the economy? Someone asked, I thought it's an interesting question. So we look at it both ways, right? How does it affect the US economy and how does it affect the Nigerian economy? So, Chinwe, do you have anything to chime in? Sorry, Nneka.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
The repercussions, I feel that the repercussions are going to be more on the scrutinization of people coming in, regardless of what visas they're coming in on. We've already seen that there's been discrimination at the airports where people were being sent back and had valid visas, but ultimately, even though they were, granted the visa and arrived here in the United States, they were still deemed inadmissible and sent back to wherever they came from. So, I mean, we have to look at the implications of that in terms of visitors, people that are coming in, students that are not able to complete their course because their visas are being denied. It might be a temporary ban, as some people tout it to be. It might be rescinded, but the consequences are tantamount, and they're not just economics. They're also just people and having their life upended.
Okay.
Okay. So Chinwe, coming to you. I guess for your own personal economy, this will be pretty good, right? Because a lot of people are looking for lawyers right now.
Complaining. But let me chime in about Nneka saying that when people come in with legitimate visas, they're not admitted into the United States. That is true. And that happens because when you're, like I said, at the point of entry, the immigration officer has the right to deny you, to admit you into the United States. Now, the reasons are not known. We don't have the information they have. We don't understand the reasons why. But there's so many grounds of inadmissibility that if we start discussing it here, it's going to be outside the scope of this presentation. But there are reasons why people are inadmissible. So if you even have a legitimate visa and you're coming in and they make a determination that you're inadmissible, then you will not be allowed to come into the United States. And people on a student visa, like I said, this administration is currently enforcing most of the laws that were in place before. In the past, most times when people on student visa are coming, they don't comply with the rules of being a student in the United States. And nobody cares because the enforcement laws were not really strong. This administration is choosing to enforce. So if you come in on a student visa and you're coming in as a full-time student, and for whatever reason, your family cannot afford to pay the tuition or you're not taking the full classes, that visa will be revoked. The fact that you're issued a visa does not mean that it cannot be revoked if you're not in compliance. So those are some of the things that we have to be sure about, that is happening before we can make a broad-based argument that they're denying and they're not denying, or that they're discriminating and they're not discriminating. So in my own line of work, specific to some of the clients that I've had who have had their visas revoked, when you look to the facts, you will understand why. And that is on a case-by-case basis. And you have to advise people legally as to why, what they're doing, why it's wrong, and what they need to do in order to be in compliance. And then either reapply and or change status to another category.
Okay, thanks. So Chinwe, you talked about undue, demonstrating undue hardship, right? As a way to get past this ban, right?
Yes.
So there's a question here. Someone's asking, can you please give specific examples of how to demonstrate that you meet the requirements of the waiver? Yes. What are examples of?
Okay, the thing is, we're having, in order for us to, the guideline from the Trump administration is really not that clear. But what is clear is the Supreme Court's ruling on what is undue hardship and what is extreme hardship. Mm-hmm. Now, undue hardship is something as simple as being denied access to basic necessities. So if your wife is in America and you're not allowed to come and love her as passionately as you would want to love her, you're not allowed to come and be with her, you're not allowed to cohabit with her, that is undue hardship. If your parents are overseas and you want them to come and live with you and be part of their grandchildren's life, or to even be part of your life, that would be an undue hardship, denying that person. So undue hardship burden is really low. It is not extreme hardship. So it's not a difficult bar to cross. If your spouse, let's say you have issues, health issues and health concerns, and you're not being allowed to come to the United States, that would also be undue hardship. So that is the first element. The second element is that you're coming into the United States is in the United States national interest. That is also easy to overcome. The rule says if a US entity or a US person is going to undergo hardship, not even undue hardship, just hardship, then you should be allowed to come in. So what is that, a hardship? Let's say you have a spouse, a US citizen spouse, and she's here all alone. Let's say she has health issues, or she has some difficulties, or she even wants you to come and be with her. Denying you access to come into the United States is, in effect, hardship on her. If she has to travel overseas to come and be with you, let's say you're married to her, and every other day she's traveling to come and spend one weekend and come back, fly thousands of miles, those are hardship. Those are expenses. Those are hardships. So as long as you can document some of these things, like immigration, everything about immigration is actually documentation, 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 and making a compelling argument. So the one that is difficult is the one that is in the US national interest. That is where the Nigerian government is having, the Nigerians will have problem because the Nigerian government is not providing data. So let's say you're a Nigerian and you have lived an exemplary life. You've never been arrested. You've never had any issue. You're not a terrorist. The Nigerian government is unable to provide data about you to say, like in America, once you have a social security, you have anything, if you commit any crime, it will pull your records. That is being made impossible because of Nigerian government's inability to set up a system that can allow people to access information. So if you're not able to prove all these three things, then you're not eligible for waiver. So that is the key. Once you're able to prove these three things, you will be eligible for waiver, and they will give you your immigrant visa to come and stay permanently in the United States with your loved ones.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chinwe, for that. So I just use my own personal experience and some of the opinions that we've had, I guess, living out here. And I think this is where, it works for, having both of you on here. What I found is that typically, if you're having challenges and you go down the legal route, you can also get some boost by also going the lobbying route, right? So I've seen a lot of people who go in and they're having problems and they actually go in and reach out to their congressperson, they're senators, and they get letters. And I've actually had somebody who his wife was denied, and he got a letter, and that letter
it changes it immediately.
Right. So I think that's where, both sides, both of you guys here, what you guys do come into play, and it's very useful, right? And so now if you're talking about, you can go to your senators or your congressperson. Now, I think that even adds more credence when you say, okay, if your congressperson or senator is even a Nigerian, right, then that should be more opportunity and more support in achieving what you are seeking, right? So, Nneka, I'll just allow you to jump in there, but I'm sure you've had some examples of, if you can just describe a little bit of what the process or the best way to navigate, using, if you're having challenges, yes, you have the documentation, you're following the legal path, but how do you have your congressperson or your senator or your representative support you as well?
Well, it's important to know who represents you, who is your congressperson. There are many websites online, or you can just plug it in on Google. You put your zip code, and you should be able to search for, who represents me, who am I a constituent of, and just begin that relationship with your elected official. Send a letter. Say, okay, this is the problem and this is affecting me. I live in your district. What can you do for me that will help the situation? Starting from that, I think, is the first step into establishing some kind of relationship with elected officials. Just a simple call, introducing, if you're able to, making an office visit, a quick one, to give the information on why this policy is why the congressperson should vote a certain way. I think that goes a long way for a beginning advocacy stage, and really follow politics, follow what is going on. I think those are things that will allow people to be a little bit more plugged into the system.
Okay. Thanks. Chiman, do you have anything to add to that? I know, how does having my congressperson write a letter or support my efforts, how does that work? We already have
what we have found out, there's a body of American lawyers, ALA, there's several bodies out there. And so sometimes we get feedbacks from lawyers who are immigration practicing attorneys. And then most times on those forums, you're able to glean and look to see what is going on. What we found out is, let's say you have a letter from a congressperson or even the mayor of your local representative attesting to you, the US immigrants character. And you accompany those with your petition for waiver. It's been known to get the reviewing officer to lean more towards granting. But we need to understand that most of these things are discretionary. So you can even have all of those things and still get a denial. So it's the ability of the immigrant to be able to persuade whoever is issuing the visa that you merit what you're seeking is key. So that's why I said at the beginning that it's always good to retain an immigration attorney who will guide you through the process, prepare you for those consular visits, so you understand some of the key questions that may be asked, and then have prepared responses in order to be able to at least stand a chance of having your visa approved.
Okay. All right, thanks. So I guess what I'm getting out of this conversation, one, you need, start the process, right? Whatever you're seeking, you can start the process for anybody who's outside. If you're inside already or your loved one is already inside, this ban doesn't affect you. You can change status, you can move from one category to another, right? Other part is become more involved, right, in the community and the politics of your community. Figure out what is going on, figure out who's representing you, and then make the effort to engage with them, right? I think both efforts need to go hand in hand, right? Especially in this climate that we have today, right?
Yes. Okay.
So just a few more questions and then I guess we'll wrap up. So one other question here, I'm just gonna read it exactly as it is. I'm not sure I can make it out. So it says, can a K3 non-immigrant visa application made in Nigeria for the spouse of a US citizen be used to avoid the negative effect of this recent travel ban? So
okay, K3 is
while in Nigeria.
Okay, yeah, K3 is the way K3 works is if you're married to a Nigerian and you're a US citizen or a green card holder, and then you want to expedite the process of them coming out here. In addition to filing an I-130 petition, you also file a K3 petition saying that you want them to come here so that they can adjust status here. The thing with filing both lately is the Trump administration generally moots the K3. So once you submit the two applications, what we find is it expedites the approval of the I-130. And once the I-130 is approved, then it moots the request to expedite for your wife to come on a K3 visa. So but let's assume you have the K3 and you go to the embassy, then you can get a visa to come here and adjust status in the US. But note that if you're engaged, I'm trying to be very careful here what I'm saying. So if you're engaged and you're not yet married, then you can petition for your fiancé to come on a K1 visa. That is a non-immigrant visa, and there's no ban on that. So if they come out as a K1, then you can get married within 90 days, and then you can adjust status here. So that is a strategy you can use to navigate the current terrain. If your fiancé, I didn't say wife, if your fiancé is in Nigeria. But if you've already married the person, unfortunately, you have to seek a waiver.
Okay, thanks. So just from what you just said, I think the main thing here is you've got to be very clear on what type of visa
you're seeking
fits the situation that you're in. And I think that's where there's a lot of confusion.
That's why you need to consult an immigration lawyer.
Yes. So I think a lot of people are not very clear
on to embarking on whatever strategy or whatever you're doing. Seek an immigration lawyer's opinion. It helps.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, okay. Another interesting question just popped in. See, Nneka, this might be up your alley. Second, so the question, I'll just read it out here. It says, what if your elected representative belongs to the party of the current president? How do you convince them to give you a letter to the consular officer? Wouldn't that be risky? Nneka, I'll start with you on that. Try to unmute you here. Oh, there we go. Yes, so go ahead, Nneka.
So the question again was, how do you contact your elected official if the person is from the opposing party? So we're talking about Republicans.
I guess more of how do you convince, how do you convince your elected representative if
you are a constituent,
the party of the current president?
It doesn't matter. You're a constituent. You can send your request both to Republican and Democrats.
Okay. And what recommendations would you give? I mean, I can understand the apprehension of sending. I mean, if you're being represented by, let's say, Lindsey Graham, right? Most people will probably be apprehensive. So what kind of advice would you give in terms of an approach for someone who's maybe visibly opposed to, chain migration, for instance?
I personally think that if you are trying your level best to do everything in your power to bring your relative here, that the party of the person who you have to lobby really doesn't matter. I think it's important to tell people that, this is going on and that this is happening, and put pressure on them. Okay, if your representative is a Republican, explain this is why this is affecting my family. And as a constituent, as somebody who lives in your district, even if you're a Republican, if you don't listen, I will not vote for you next year.
Okay. I don't know, Chinwe, you have any experience from people, have you had any clients that have been in this kind of situation?
Where they needed to go to the congressperson
Yeah, but I mean, let's be a bit more general. Like people who are, I mean, most of us tend to be just a bit apprehensive, right, about the process. So, I mean, have you had a chance to talk to me
With
about
regards to, I think I agree with Nneka. Nigerians need to start being active and participate in the political process in America. Even if we're not running for office, we need to be engaged. If you have a congressperson, I think people need to understand that once the person is an elected official, they stop campaigning. That is the ideal thing. So they're representing everybody, whether you're a Republican and or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. What needs to happen is we need to engage. Most times during their off seasons, elected officials have town halls and things. People don't participate. So we need to participate in that process. If you are participating, then they will get to know you so that when you're making a request, somebody can now effectively write and say, yes, I have a personal relationship with this person. I've interacted with them. They've assisted, they've volunteered in this, in this, in this. Those type of written letters help to boost your application. It doesn't mean that it will guarantee a grant, but if you have your, say your senator or your Congress, your House representative, write a letter in an official capacity to the Nigerian consulate saying that I know this individual, this person is in my is a member of my constituent, and I've had this relationship, is a person of good moral character, this person is this. There's no way that it will not weigh heavily in a decision-making process. It doesn't mean that it will guarantee, because they can't advocate or ask the person to do their on how to do their job, but it will, what they're writing is just character letters for you. And the only way somebody can write something effectively is if they have a relationship with you. So even if you're a Democrat or a Republican, it doesn't matter. Once somebody is elected in office, you need to engage and make sure that they hear you and they understand your issues, because they are representing you. That is the way the system works here.
Oh, okay, thanks, Chinwe. So a little over the hour mark. I'm just gonna, I think we've gone through the questions. So if anyone still has questions that's listening in, please send them in. But at this point, I think we just start wrapping up. So I'm gonna allow our panelists just to do a quick summary of what they've talked about here today, talk about what they do, and talk about how people who want to engage with them can actually reach out to them and contact them or engage with them. So Nneka, let you go first.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to just ensure that people are actively participating in politics. It's very important. Tuesdays are primaries in many states, so please go out there and exercise your right and vote. Our organization, the African Public Affairs Committee, will be organizing some actions on Capitol Hill on March 11th and 12th. Details are still being worked out. We're looking for people who are willing to tell their stories, people who are being affected, that are impacted by these policies, to go on Capitol Hill and talk to some Congress people. If anyone is interested remotely, even in supporting this effort, because these efforts need support. So if you plan on doing something, you can contact me at nneka@afripac.org. That is Nneka@afripac.org. You can visit our website, www.afripac.org, and follow us on social media as well. There's a few actions planned as well for a Cameroonian that was detained in ICE custody. There's going to be a rally and protest sometime at the end of the month. For any updates on immigration, at least on policy, we don't just work on that, but if anybody is interested, please feel free to connect with me online. Thank you so much for giving us the platform for this program, Obi.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nneka. Chinwe, so closing remarks.
Yes, I want to thank you, Obina, for arranging this. This is an awesome platform to disseminate information. I am an immigration attorney. I am based in Houston, but immigration is a federal law, so it doesn't matter where you live. You can contact us. My law firm is Daria Law Firm, and our website is darialawfirm.com. Just to wrap up, I just wanted to say the travel ban is an expanded travel ban, and Nigeria is now included. We need to know that it's a temporary ban. It's not a permanent ban because it's not enshrined in immigration law. This is an executive order that Trump administration is advocating. So it's a temporary ban. There's also a process to review to see if nations are in compliance. So once Nigeria comes into compliance, I am certain that the ban will be lifted, because the Nigerian economy is not one that I believe the United States government would want to neglect. And the travel ban does not affect non-immigrants, which is how a significant percentage of Nigerians come to the United States. So if you've been coming here with your family annually to visit, or you have visiting visa, multiple visas, this ban does not impact or affect you in any which way. So you shouldn't be bothered with it. If you're a student that normally comes in, and this ban also does not affect you, you have a student visa. This ban is primarily for people seeking to come to the United States to remain here permanently in a permanent resident category. That's immigrants. If you're impacted and you have an interview at the consulate, I will strongly advise you to look to retain a lawyer to prep you, because the waiver will most likely apply to you. So you need to be able to articulate the responses and be able to, so that you can effectively respond to questions and see if you'll be granted a waiver. But even if you're denied a waiver, they can give you another opportunity to try later, or you can start, your family member here can start the process all over again. So as long as you note that it's a temporary ban and not a permanent ban, and that it's only affecting a limited segment of our community, then we should look cautiously and optimistically that hopefully this ban will be lifted for Nigerians. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chinwe and Nneka, for that. A few more questions popped up, just really around the platform. So someone asked about the contact information. So this video will be recorded, and we'll actually send out emails to the attendees and all the registrants. So we'll also include their contact information. I know they've given it out here, but they'll also be included in the email that you receive. If you need to contact them and don't get the contact information, please reach out to us. Regarding this series, so this is the NgEX Virtual Diaspora series. Yeah, someone asked if there's going to be more like this. Yes, definitely. Our plan is to have one every month. And the goal is really to have a platform where members of the diaspora can come in and engage with people in the diaspora and Nigeria, right, on issues that are of importance to them. So we showcase people in Nigeria and the diaspora, and we give people a platform to talk about what their experiences have been, their successes or the challenges and all that. And using the webinar, our goal is to ensure that we can reach a broad population of the diaspora. So yes, so definitely keep in touch with us. We do have contact information. We'll be sending out reminders of when we have the next event. The next one will be coming up in March. We'll feature somebody in the diaspora. And as issues come up, we'll try to be a bit more proactive and get in front of the issues as well. If you do have recommendations of either people that you want us to feature on the platform, issues that you want us to address on the platform, please contact us. We're available. Our website is, you can go to nigeriandiaspora.com, info@nigeriandiaspora.com, and we're also on social media. Parent company is NgEX, and this is a part of the NgEX event platform. Question? Okay, so there are no more questions, and I think we've had a pretty robust conversation here. So I'd like to thank Chinwe and Nneka for taking their time. I hope this was particularly useful for everyone. I learned a lot. In summary, get prepared. You can get started, get the process started, understand which visa type fits your situation. Get involved in politics, engage with your local representatives, participate in elections. Elections matter. the fastest way to get this out is to get somebody in who believes in what you believe in, and they can probably maybe revoke this since this is an executive. This is an executive decision, right? So again, thank you, Chinwe, and thank you, Nneka, and thank you everyone for attending. And we will be in touch. And please look out for the next email that comes in that tells you about the series for March. Thank you, everyone.